Коллеги, добрый день.
Colleagues, good afternoon.
У нас с вами середина дня.
That's the middle of the day, the first day of the Gaidar Forum, and this is high time to speak about money. Our session is dedicated to foreign assets. It's called Russian Foreign Assets Disclosure Will Show. Why? Today we're speaking about money. This topic is always relevant, and please look at the screen at the presentation. And let's have a look at what brings all these people together. So, former President of Ukraine, Mr. Poroshenko, Aliyev, President Ivanishvili, these are well-known personalities and politicians, and they're united by one factor. They have become implicated in an international scandal which broke out 5 years ago, in which was related to millions of files of low-profile Panama company, which helped to hide assets for more than 140 politicians all over the world. And this is a Panama Papers scandal. And I think that the scandal of such a scale and disclosure information about dozens of tax havens actually cannot be replicated. Why? Because the countries which stand up for tax competition, fair tax competition, agreed that they need a tool which would allow these countries to get information regardless of whether the residents of these countries want it or not want it automatically. And really, a system of automatic exchanging of information was launched within the OECD. And before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to make a poll among our listeners and viewers. Where do you keep your assets? You have several options. I keep my assets in the Russian bank, in a foreign bank, under a pillow because this is much safer. Or probably we have progressive listeners who keep their assets in cryptocurrencies. While you are voting, let me introduce to you our panelists. Dmitry Volvach. Dmitry, I know you for quite a while. You are deputy head of the Federal Tax Service of Russia, and in fact, this is the key figure, the holder of the confidential information on the Russians' foreign assets. And certainly, we cannot do without banks when we're speaking about finances and about data. Hence, we have Larisa Zalomikhina, Senior Managing Director for Compliance in Sberbank of Russia. And we'll see later that Sberbank has a wide network abroad. And it means that we're going to speak about how Sberbank is working with the residents of other countries abroad. Online with us is the key expert for the OECD, Mr. Housden, who is the head of the exchange information tool within the OECD. This is the key platform where the countries are sharing their experience on the automatic data exchange, and they show the results of that data exchange, and the OECD would be monitoring that tool, that instrument, and would even do some evaluation or assessment for the countries as to whether they achieved good results or not. Let me proceed with our very first speaker, Dmitry Volvach. Dmitry, just on the eve of the new year, a new decree for the Federal Tax Service was taken, and Turkey, Nigeria, and some other countries were added to the list of the countries with which we exchange the information on residents' foreign assets. We had that system for several years, and what secrets actually became known to the Federal Tax Service because of that instrument. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of you. And it's a pleasure and privilege for me to speak in such a cozy room, but at the same time, sharing the panel with Red, person who I know for 7 years already, and his brilliant team being in charge of Mission Impossible, brought together more than 100 countries all over the world and developed and launched the standard in a very brief period of time. And we were part of that procedure, and it was also a privilege for me. And I'm also sharing this panel with Larisa Zalomikhina from Sberbank. These are the people who helped us very much, and we checked every hour step with them, every decision which we took, and even actually verified the definitions and some terms which we're using. Now we are working with our banking community colleagues despite the pandemic limitations and restrictions, and we work very pragmatically, constructively, and successfully. And I would like to remind you, the viewers and the listeners, and actually probably you all know what the global automatic data exchange standard started with. Actually, this standard, at least the mandate to develop that standard, originates from 2012 at the summit meeting in St. Petersburg under the presidency of the Russian Federation and headed by the Russian President Mr. Putin, and such a decision was enshrined in St. Petersburg Declaration. A big section was dedicated to that declaration, stating that the OECD has, in the shortest period of time, to promote its plan on BEPS, and secondly, the OECD has to develop a standard for automatic data exchange, and it had to be actually even launched in 2015, but unfortunately some amendments had to be done due to the external factors, but Rad's team completed this Mission Impossible, and already in 2017, half of the participants in that project, the so-called early adopters, exchanged the first confidential information, and the Russian Federation stated that it is going to be part of the development procedure. I personally took part in the work of the technical and technological working groups, and Russia was among 25 countries which co-founded the CTS, which acts as the hub for transferring the confidential data in a secured way. And we became part of the exchange system back in 2018, as by 2017 we created necessary technological infrastructure. We were assessed as to whether our data and our resources are safe and secure, and it was done by the Secretariat of the OECD. And in 2017 we did some test exchanges, and end of the year we exchanged the first live data with the OECD member states which were ready to exchange that data. At the moment, as of today, we have the third stage of data exchange for 2019 out of more than 100 countries which are part of that procedure. 99 are our counterparties, including the ones who are going to start the data exchange next year. And the list of countries which are part of the data exchange procedure is expanding, and you said that we now have 8 or even 9 new jurisdictions, and I think that this scope would expand in future. At least we're working to that end. We are collecting from our partners from all over the world, the partners who are part of that exchange information system, the data on the residents' foreign assets. happens in all the countries of the world. And there is some prejudice, but let me say from the very beginning that this is neither good nor bad that people have some foreign assets or assets abroad. But the main objective is to make people used to one thing, the budget regulation, the international standards, and budget standards have to be complied with, and in order to do that, you have to transparently declare your assets and to pay necessary returns and necessary taxes, either where you generate your revenue or where you act as a resident. And this exchange of data among more than 100 countries, it acts as a guarantee that this information is open and transparent, and there are no temptations and there are no risks, saying that let us not to declare any revenues or incomes because no one will ever know about that. So the work which was done by the OECD, the journey which was made by the OECD during that mandate from G20, as I said, 108 countries disclosed the confidential information about the residents' foreign assets, certainly complying with the safety, security, and privacy rules. The standard has the following features. First of all, we are speaking not only about the banking assets or accounts, so these would be the depot assets, investment accounts, and life insurance agreements, and the trust funds also have to be disclosed within that agreement, although Russia actually has not regulated the trust funds yet, but they're quite popular among the Russian citizens, just like among other investors, such as entrepreneurs and private persons. The standard requires that certain jurisdictions have to be informed and notified, not just about the nominal holder of certain assets or existence of certain trusts, but the ultimate beneficiary has to be disclosed. And I think that this is the key thing about the standard. I know what bulk of work was done by the financial markets, and I know how due diligence is being done in order to comply with the compliance standards. For every customers, the new ones and the existing ones, they have first of all to identify the ultimate beneficiary, because it would depend on how the declaration is filled out. Let me quote several figures. As of today, and we see that we have a quite sustainable database. The Russian residents, at least in the part covered by the automatic system, the Russians have about 700,000 accounts, and we are speaking about 400,000 tax residents, legal entities and physical persons, and the ruble balance is about 30 trillion Russian rubles. That's a quite serious amount of money. Is it something which you learned on you that already? Actually, certainly we knew a lot. We knew a lot. As for the administrators, it was very important for us to keep everything clean. We were keen to learn what new risks we may identify using the automatic data exchange system. And certainly we learned a lot of new things, but comparing to the database which we see at the moment, I may say that the Russian taxpayers are highly compliant. Certainly, we identify certain discrepancies and mismatches, but this amount and the scope is negligible compared to what we get from our foreign partners. I have to interrupt you because we have the feedback from our listeners and viewers. The results of the poll show that 73% of our listeners keep their money, keep their assets in the Russian Russian banks, 6% keep their assets in foreign banks, 17% just keep that at home, and about 4%. These are the ones actually who keep their money in cryptocurrencies. It was something expectable, but I even thought that the percentage of those who keep their money in foreign banks would be even below 6%. When we spoke the topic of foreign assets, discussing that with the chancellor of our university, we tried to answer the question who these people are. And you already said that you knew a lot, but still you identified something new. But we spoke a lot about the OECD, let me add. Actually, a lot of offshore jurisdictions joined that tool. A lot of offshore jurisdictions are now part of that system. And I made reference to Panama Papers, and Panama Papers actually changing data with 65 countries, including Russia. And this is a showcase of the force which the OECD and the international community are wielding. So there is a peer power pressure tool, and we see the exercise of that power exemplified by the Panama Papers. I'd like to pass the floor to Rod. Housden, we are glad to see you. And we know that more than 100 countries are part of the multilateral agreement on the automatic exchanging of information, but at the same time we know that 45 countries are not yet part of that exchange procedure. We know the countries which initially opted out of that system, such as the United States, but over to you. What results of the international or global data exchange you see in terms of the countries? What are the results in terms of the money which actually was identified by the countries' budgets? So whether this tool really gave more transparency to the world?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to this event. It's a real privilege being part of this panel and to talk to you today. I'm very excited to tell you some more about the new standard that we've been working on. And thank you specifically to Dmitry for his very kind words. I think maybe one thing that's perhaps useful to clarify is that the Global Forum, which is where I'm working, is the Secretariat is provided by the OECD, but it in fact has 161 member jurisdictions. So it's a vast body that all work together to make sure that international standards are implemented across the globe in a standardized way. And that's our strength, in fact, is having a body of 161 jurisdictions that all operate on an equal footing to make sure that there is confidence that there's a level playing field and that all jurisdictions are doing what they should be doing. As a little bit of background, and this was already covered in excellent detail by Dmitry, in 2014, there was the creation of a brand new standard. And this standard is, in fact, quite a thick book. And what differs from what came before is that here we have a legal standard as well as a technical standard. And it goes into incredible detail to make sure that we have confidence in the information that's being exchanged, both with respect to the legal accuracy of that information to ensure we're getting the right information, but also in a technical way to ensure the information can be exchanged in an automated manner. And that's really the fundamental basis behind effective automatic exchange of information. What we saw before was that a jurisdiction, if they had a particular investigation open on a particular person, they had to ring up the potential partner where information may be held and asks for the specific piece of information that was the missing piece of their puzzle. You kind of had to know what you were looking for before you were able to even ask that question. And the big shift that's happened then in 2014 was the creation of a standard whereby each and every year consistently predefined information and kind of broad in scope is automatically exchanged each year with jurisdictions where a taxpayer is resident. And this includes a vast range of financial information, whether it's about bank accounts or hedge funds or investment trusts, life insurance policies, etc. So it's broad, also broad in scope. We have 100 jurisdictions that have already implemented it, including the vast majority of financial centers. I know that the US was already mentioned previously. The US is conducting some exchanges under their FATCA legislation, so there is some exchange automatically and on a reciprocal basis. Although we of course hope that they would come on board with this automatic exchange of information standard as well. Although it should be noted that when developing this standard, a lot of inspiration was already taken from the US FATCA rules. I should also mention that exchanges have commenced, as Dmitry set out. 2017, there was a first batch of jurisdictions, and 2018, a second batch of jurisdictions, and more continue to come online. There are currently around 7,000 exchange relationships. So each and every year, with respect to around 7,000 exchange relationships, bulk information with respect to financial assets held offshore is exchanged with the partner jurisdiction where the taxpayer is found to be resident. The current phase we are in the kind of life cycle of this new standard is that we are now peer reviewing the implementation by every jurisdiction to make sure the implementation is effective. And so me and my team are now very much focused on making sure that not only are exchanges happening, but they're happening in an effective way, that the information exchanges is the correct information. And just to note, while it's been a very quick period since 2014, a huge amount of efforts gone through. I'm hoping now that all the viewers will be somewhat more aware of this standard, because every time you now open a bank account or a new financial account, you probably and you should be asked to confirm what your tax residency is, and the financial institution that you're opening that account with will then verify that according to their records, and it's on that basis that the information is then exchanged.
Thank you very much. If you have 100 jurisdictions, this is a very serious system. We know, Dmitry, that there are countries which historically were not part of this exchange, like the US, because they use their own FATCA system. And we know that in 2013, Russia was part of the negotiations on the bilateral exchange. But until now, Russian banks, in a one-lateral way, provide information on the U.S. residents to the tax and the revenue department of the U.S., but we do not see the reciprocal process. There is another side. This is another country, very interesting country, the UK. It was part of informatic exchange. Now, de facto, they are out of this system. And well, on some estimates, 1/5 of the elite real estate in London is owned by Russians. It's difficult to believe, not to believe that for you as a federal tax authority, we're not interested in this information. What are, in general, the prospects, the outlook to include these countries in the mutual information exchange? I'd like to begin with the following. We have, with our colleagues from tax authorities of the United States and the UK. With these colleagues, we have wonderful professional relations. And we have very reliable partners for each other in terms of the on-demand data exchange. The information which they need to get, or we need to get from them in the framework of some spotted control and audit measures, we can get this information and we get it without any complications. With the Great Britain, we are both part of the exchange in CBCR framework country reporting. As for the United States, Red, without his input, I wouldn't say that, but I also hope that in some near future, those two standards will cease to double each other, and only one global international standard will prevail, will work. And I'm almost sure that the load on financial institutions in this double work on two standards is absolutely huge. And this is about the financial financial institutes all over the world. Once in a while it will be resolved, I'm sure. And with my counterparty from the United States, from IRS, we are co-chairs of the task force on GT platform. This task force develops measures to counter non-compliance within FATCO and CRS. And the approaches are absolutely similar, and the evasion methods and the control measures are very similar. So ideological standards are practically have no difference. They have taken all the best from each other, and we would like to have teams there, as the mandatory indicated. This is a separate desire. We hope that once it will appear. As for the UK, you mentioned that also in terms of the requests on demand to exchange, there's no problem, and I sincerely believe in the global rule of law, based on which sooner or later regulations are being executed, and I also truly believe in the professionalism and the reasonable approach of my colleagues from the UK, who understand very well that in order to get information which can be received in the framework of a regulated exchange without spending any efforts now, it is more complicated. Some preparation work should be done, negotiations should be led, applications filed, and then information to get. And this information could have been received only by the file exchange. Now we have exchange which was shifted from December. We are finishing to get information from our foreign counterparties, and we uploaded our files in December in the full. Just an example, if logical control is not passed, the colleagues from Cayman, I write a letter to my counterparty, I explain everything, he sees everything. Less than 1 day is passed, and we get not an answer, but also receive the corrected file, which can be uploaded to the system. So even the contribution in terms of time and effort also speak in favor of the fact that probably the automatic exchange has to be expanded, and the scope should be expanded. So the question of Panama. In 2019, we had a series of talks which resulted in it successfully, and we are also reliable partners with Panama counterparties. I'd like to add a little bit here. I sincerely hope that in the nearest future we will add our partners on CIS and today within the perimeter of ex-USSR, we have exchange with Azerbaijan, with Latvia and Estonia, and I hope next year we will have Kazakhstan and Moldova, and the Republic of Belarus is working very actively on that, and we do our best to use and to share our experience within this format to expand the scope and the perimeter of the participating countries as much as possible. To the question of expanding, I'd like to come back to Rad. We know by the end of 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, the exchange happened more than 84 million financial accounts. These are very expressive figures. Maybe there could have been more if more countries could join the scope. There are Georgia, Ukraine, Dominican Republic. And the second question, the issue of evasion scheme use from automatic exchange, which are used by countries which are already part of this economic exchange. Such brilliant example as gold visas and gold passports, so-called golden passports, and around 22 schemes which OECD published on his website. Rad, please tell us what are main gaps and problems you see from the point of view of implementation of the automatic exchange.
Yes, thank you very much. And you're absolutely right. The numbers we've seen so far are quite staggering. I was quite shocked. I think around 10 trillion euros in assets was exchanged in 2019. And this will increase because the number of jurisdictions coming online is increasing further all the time. I think I just want to touch quickly on 3 points when it comes to ensuring that the AEOI standard is effective. And I think this comes down to the question, as you said, about whether there's loopholes and whether the coverage is full. And so these 3 points are, firstly, we need to ensure full participation. At the beginning of this process, there was a commitment process whereby all jurisdictions who are developed countries or who have a financial center were asked to commit to the standard. And the vast majority of those have done so and are already exchanging and have delivered on their commitments. But of course, that doesn't mean that the journey has ended. For an AEOI standard to be effective, it should have as wide a coverage as possible. And so we have processes to ensure that happens. One is a jurisdiction of relevance process, whereby members of the Global Forum may point out other jurisdictions they believe should be involved in AEOI and to bring them on board. And we also provide huge levels of support to developing countries who weren't originally asked to commit, but who could really benefit from this standard. And we provide a huge amount of support to bring them online. On peer reviews, which is my second point here, this is one of the main focus at the moment, where the numbers themselves are interesting, but they don't really tell you that the AEOI standard is delivering on its objectives. And so to support an effective standard, we use peer reviews, as we have done for many years on previous standards, to make sure that implementation is happening properly. This includes a check on the legal framework to make sure that all of the detailed due diligence rules have been properly reflected. And you may have seen that we published our first comprehensive report on all of the legal frameworks, and we published that towards the end of last year. It's available online, you can find it. And now our focus is very much on effectiveness in practice. This includes a huge focus on the compliance regimes that jurisdictions have in place to ensure that financial institutions are properly carrying out the due diligence rules. And I'm sure many financial institutions have already had engagements with their tax authorities to understand what level of compliance activity would be required. We will look in detail at the risk assessment that's carried out, the types of interventions that are carried out, and then the outcomes of those interventions to ensure full compliance. Because it's only through effective implementation by financial institutions that we can be confident that the standard itself is working effectively. This will be a detailed review and take some time, and we are intending to publish the results of this in 2022. Finally, whilst we need to make sure the existing standard is being properly implemented, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that as we learn and as taxpayers learn, there may be need to make the standard itself stronger. And so here, to date, we've continually maintained the standard in terms of bringing out new clarifications and guidance. And for example, it's been highlighted a lot in the media about residence by investment schemes and whether taxpayers can put investments in certain jurisdictions to claim a new residence. And here, risky residence by investment schemes were highlighted by the OECD, and these are ones that are very flexible in terms of taxpayers being able to make use of them. And further clarification to financial institutions was issued in order for them to be more critical where or provide some additional analysis where the residence by investment scheme is used and where it's a particularly risky scheme because it's so flexible. And finally, there's the revision of the standard itself. This is a major project going on by the OECD, which is to reflect on whether there's holes in the standard or whether the standard needs to be strengthened. And there's a particular focus during this review on the issue of crypto assets. That's probably not a surprise. Obviously, the Financial Action Task Force and the OECD and others have been very focused on crypto assets. So the AEOI standard is no different, and this is also an area we're looking at in detail.
Thank you very much, Rad. Remembering the situation some 4 years ago when the topic of cryptocurrencies was just beginning, and this was a trendy topic at that time, and one of the key questions was, is there an exchange on cryptocurrency, or is it just an opportunity to go away from declaring your income? And yes, indeed, for a while, cryptocurrencies were not included in this this exchange scheme. But the big brother is watching us, as we can see in cryptocurrencies, crypto wallets. This is the nearest future which is ahead of us in terms of automatic exchange. Our session supports the gender equality rules. Myself and Larisa represent another part of the humanity. And Larisa, I have a question to you. It was said a lot about compliance, as Dmitry correctly mentioned, banks, and actually you have to bear those main tasks and efforts in due diligence and reporting about clients on the confirmation of residency and so on and so forth. I have two questions. First, whether it's too expensive for a bank to launch this system in all terms of the word: budget, human resources, was it expensive really? And secondly, have you faced any fraud cases from clients? And if yes, could you cite some examples? I'd like to begin with the fact that, of course, for banks, the identification procedure is not a new thing. Banks have been doing this job, this function, for a number of decades. And of course, with the appearance of the automatic exchange idea, we had to learn how to determine the tax residency of our clients. And in this sense, the tax service provided us unprecedented methodological support, because from the very beginning, when the regulatory documents were designed, all those issues have been developed in detail in order to be doable from the operational point of view. What's on the mind of the bank? The bank should aim three targets. First, the task set by regulator. The secondly, to do it from the operational point of view very efficiently. And thirdly, to think about the client, what will be convenient for the client, and whether we will provide additional complications for clients who don't want to know what is automatic tax information exchange and don't want to bother with this topic and with all these procedures. So the key to the solution of this tripod task is to embed in a normal banking process, to embed everything which would allow the bank to provide truthfully and authentic reporting information. And every time the client faces the need to carry out financial or non-financial transaction, he could visit a branch or use remote communication channels. He could get some additional information from client. He could inform the teller if he's in the office, or he can use the bank client system to get some feedback from us or get some questions from us too, which would allow us to verify and to authenticate the client and the information based on the developed criteria, and see whether there are some indirect signs that the client has some special tax status. And also we can learn more information about the client. And in this normal mode of interaction with the client, we clarify all those issues for us. Certainly, all situations when different jurisdictions have different approaches to determining the taxation status, and every time the local legislation is coming to play. And as we mentioned, that we wish we had the information about the taxpayers number and how in different jurisdictions this number could be designed. What should be the combination of digits and characters is correct or not. And here a very important role is by methodological instruments and due diligence. If client made some mistake somewhere, the client will be consulted at the stage of the opening the account that something doesn't match with the filled information. The client is able to correct this information. So we shouldn't say that this is expensive expensive or not expensive. This is a normal banking activity, which of course demanded some reconstruction of our procedures. I should tell you, Sberbank of Russia is aimed at servicing Russian clients, residents, and the share of clients with which are not resident, where obviously couldn't have questions about their taxation status, is not very big. It's just a tiny fractions of percent in Russia. And of course, clients with Russian passports could have also some specialty taxation regimes. It's not a massive story, of course, and from the point of view of clients who could deliberately or indeliberately provide untrue information. Well, it's just a few cases only. It's not a massive thing. If we take the example of Sberbank, we do not spend any extra efforts to manually rework the big bulk of information. It's not required. Thank you, Larisa. You know, I started from the fact that we know each other with Dmitry very long ago, and we started not with automatic exchange. We have our favorite topic in between. When we sit together at one table, we like to discuss the currency control topic. When Dmitry told me, when I entered in this topic, I thought, what is it all about? And we have made it a trendy one and very modern one in the good sense of the word. We did a lot to liberalize the currency control, and we should say that federal authority with Ministry of Finance moved the same way, and this is very good. And I couldn't ask a question about the currency control because the topic is very close. There we have overseas accounts, here we have foreign accounts. Well, and we know that for the past year, we managed to achieve liberalization of using foreign accounts by the tax residents of Russian visitors for individuals. And the question is very simple. Can we provide this same mode for legal entities? Well, since you have asked this question, of course I will answer it. First, as promised from the very beginning, if you remember, when we started this automatic exchange topic, since it's automatic exchange, they were asking why you need to self-declare the account. As soon as the automatic exchange comes up, we would get rid of this as much as possible from the automatic declaration. And you're absolutely right, in 2019, the law was passed which allowed taxpayers in the states which are participating in the exchange to remove the majority of limitations, which simplifies for them the use of foreign accounts. So I now have a homework for me. I will come back to my office and we will try to think what limits us from lessening the regime for using the accounts of legal entities which are opened in the organization of financial market of the states which are reliable partners on automatic exchange. I think it should be a logical continuation of the liberalization trend which have been taken a few years ago.
But as you see, we have restored the gender balance because I gave a home assignment to the Deputy Director of the Federal Tax Service, and I think that we'll finish our discussion on that positive note. I would like to thank Rad once again. Thank you so much. We appreciate very much our cooperation with the OECD. And if Russia works as good with the OECD as it does with other as in other fields, then I think that we'll be a very good partner for the OECD because actually we are really working very well with the OECD. Thank you so much, Dmitry. Thank you so much, Larisa. And I hope that next year we're going to discuss the 4-year long exchange of tax data. Thank you so much.